I have played a ton of Souls-likes, but out of all of the Souls-like clones that I've played, at the very least, Void Souls has a unique perspective with it being top-down. It also has a very minimalist art style, which is both a good and a bad thing, as we'll get into. So first, let's talk about the good stuff. You can respec and change your character build at any time. There's also a nice variety within the levels. Despite being such a simple art style, each of these areas does feel distinct and unique. Each of these areas will also try to have a different mechanic for progression, like keeping warm in a blizzard and eventually removing the storm altogether. There's also good enemy variety with each of the zones and a unique boss fight waiting at the end of them. I also wanted to praise the map layout itself because there's plenty of shortcuts that you'll end up unlocking, and everything kind of leads back to the central village. And lastly, the game is highly customizable in terms of its difficulty scaling. You can tweak how much damage you take, how much damage you deal, stuff like that. Admittedly, I played this game with God mode settings because I was more interested in the world than the clunky combat, which leads us to the bad parts of the game. It's too hard. The main problem is there's too many enemies that take too long to die and kill you in one hit. So the combat becomes exhausting rather than rewarding. The weird thing is that the combat kind of tries to have this slow ebb and flow to it. But I think Void Souls would have been a lot stronger if the combat was a lot faster. But there's not really much nuance here. You're kind of just dodging or blocking. Builds eventually get interesting, but it requires a lot of endgame items in order to do so. The in-game map is also not the greatest. You can get lost very easily, and it doesn't mark all points of interest. There's also a severe amount of backtracking. See, if you die to a boss, you usually gotta walk all the way back. This is one of the main reasons that I just decided screw it and put God mode on. But the level variety takes a huge dip in the late game because you'll usually have to grab a key item and bring it all the way over to this other area, which would have been fine if it only did it like once, but by the third time I was getting tired of it. But thankfully, the game is rather short. I was able to beat it in around 5 hours, and there was still a few hours worth of items that I could have tracked down, but there was just so much backtracking and poor pacing that I don't really care. In conclusion, Void Souls is a fantastic indie Souls-like that you can get for like $20-$30, but it does suffer from the same issues that most Souls clones do. There's a very fine balance between how challenging something should be and the payoff you get for it. Void Souls does not deliver in that front, but the world itself is worth seeing.